Hi, and welcome to episode 14 of the Talent Acquisition Trends and Strategy podcast. I'm your guest host for the day. My name is Nick Andrews. I'm the VP Marketing here at SecureVision. I'm joined by James Mackey. James, how you doing today?
What's going on?
So, James, let's talk about what's going on in the world of talent acquisition this week. The first piece of news, it's the biggest one all week. It's Elon Musk, and he says he's banning remote work. For Tesla employees, he's saying that everyone has to come in the office for at least 40 hours a week. And if they don't like the policy, James, leave Tesla. You're fired if you don't want to come in the office for 40 hours a week. What are your thoughts on that one? It feels pretty harsh to me.
Yeah, it definitely feels. I mean, he's taking a strong line on it. Quite honestly, though, I, I like transparent leadership. I don't necessarily agree with his philosophy that everybody needs to be in office 40 plus hours a week. But at the same time, I do he's being very clear on his expectations
Yes,
and what he
very
thinks.
clear.
And I think where it would potentially bother me a little bit more is if this is kind of a tactic, like if he knows he's going to be laying off a bunch of people and this is basically his way of doing that without being transparent about that, then that's a little bit messed up. And if that's the case, then that's, I think that would be an error, because I think people will know if that turns out to be the reason why he's doing this. But if he's simply just saying like, look, we've decided that moving forward as an organization, we're going to be in office. He's the chief executive, and he has shareholders, and he's in that position to make the best possible decision for shareholders. Not to say again that I don't agree with it, but I don't have necessarily an issue with it as long as is he going to take care of those people as they're transitioning out and hopefully create a good experience for them and make sure that they have time to make the adjustment. And as long as he's not using this to essentially cover up the fact that
Hmm.
he's about to go through significant layoffs. So instead of just coming out the gate and saying that he's using this tactic, which that's not cool if that is the case. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah, it's interesting. What also reportedly in his note to employees was he's saying that this is less than we ask of factory workers, comparing a factory floor worker to an engineer or a finance. That doesn't feel like an apples to apples comparison to me. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, there's stories about Elon, sleeping on the floor of the factory. It feels like he has maybe a soft spot for those workers, but clearly those are two very different roles and responsibilities to kind of lump them all in one. I don't know if that makes a whole lot of sense to me.
Well, right. And like I think one of the things he said too was like, how many of the companies that are working remote are building, products that are changing the world, right? Or what's the last time they built a product that's changing the world? And it's like, okay, fine. If he's saying that the product development, product design, product roadmap team needs to be in office, then okay, right? Like for collaboration or creativity or whatever it is that he thinks is the reason. But I mean, I think just by saying like everybody needs to be in office, no, I think it's probably it could be seen as an overcorrection, but like at the same time, he's defining the culture. He's choosing that, I want people to work here that view the things similarly. I'm assuming that this is also an indication that, look, if you're coming to work at Tesla, you're not coming here for work-life balance. You're coming here to develop products that are going to change the world. And he doesn't want people probably on his team that are looking for a good work-life balance or that don't want to prioritize their career over pretty much every other aspect of their life. So I think, what he's doing is he's probably just saying like, look, if you're here at Tesla, your number one priority in your life is developing these products at Tesla. It's not taking time off. It's not, having as much time at home, or it's not, spending as much time as your kids. It's your primary focus is your career. And that's why you're at Tesla to change the world. Right. So, no, I don't think it doesn't make sense to group everyone together. Obviously, different jobs have different requirements. If it makes sense, it's because he's basically saying this is the culture, and we're looking for people that buy into our mission and buy into what we're
Right.
building. And so I get it from that perspective, but again, I think the email could be seen probably as a little bit blunt and short, but I think how I would kind of judge his actions are by the actions he takes now. How does he help individuals that are going to be transitioning out? Um, and I mean, is it just like, they're fired without severance? I mean, God, for God's sakes, that would be awful. I mean, is he going to take care of people? Is he going to give them time? Right. Now I would assume, people working at Tesla are probably obviously some of the brightest people out there in tech, right?
Right.
So they're probably going to land on their feet. Uh, but still, like I would be curious to see how he treats people as they're working their way out of the organization.
Yeah, to have that Tesla badge on your resume certainly has a lot of weight. And just to circle back to something you said earlier, is this a potential precursor to layoffs? There's also a rumor that Tesla is looking to lay off up to 10,000 people, which is roughly 10% of its workforce. So maybe this is all just one kind of master strategy. You send this kind of blazing fireball of an email coming to the office, or you're gone. And then that kind of sets the stage for these layoffs.
Yeah, I don't like that. I mean, I think it's like, again, like I feel like a lot of how he like explains things is to basically get a rise out of people and to be edgy, almost like intentionally.
Right.
And if that's the case, like if this is just him not like willing to come out and say like, look, we're going to be going through a restructure and we're going to be going through like massive layoffs, and instead he's like making it about something it's not actually, really about, then that's kind of, that's not cool.
Yeah, and I saw a lot of memes out there this week about all this Tesla news. A lot of those recruiters putting some funny memes out there. I saw one with Elon Musk with a Santa Claus hat. They were all happy. Hey, thanks for all the candidates you're putting out there. You're going to make my job a lot easier. So some recruiters having a little bit of fun with all this Tesla news.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think like the one thing to remember is that, like for instance, like we could believe, or like a big portion of the tech community and just larger community throughout America could believe that remote work is the way to do it, and it's more effective, and people are able to get more done and have better quality of life, and so therefore you're going to be able to get the best people on your team. But the reality is that every company has a right to define the culture that they want to have, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And there's people that want different things, right? So maybe the majority of people do want remote, but there might be of like top talent, right? Maybe there's 15% or 20% that wants to be in office and believes in Elon's strategy about being in office to create innovative products that are changing the world. So he doesn't have to appeal to the entire community of top talent. He has to appeal to a certain percentage that have similar values to what he does. And it can be very powerful to just hone in and say, this isn't for everybody. We don't want to be for everybody. We want to be for this segment of the market, because those are the people that we believe are going to scale this, take this business and our products to the next level. So again, like I don't have an issue with it per se. Again, it's just, the other thing that'd be really kind of messed up too. It's like, what if were they hiring people remotely up to like last month? Were they hiring people remotely?
Right. Yeah. I wonder what their policy was up to this point.
Yeah, screwed up. I mean, it's like one thing. It's like, okay, somebody's been there for a few years, or team's been established for a long period of time. But if you just accepted an offer from Tesla and you don't live near an office location, and I don't know how common this is, but they better, if that is the case, they better be willing to break those people off and give them a huge severance, because if not, that's a pretty terrible thing to do to somebody.
Yeah, and maybe there is a deeper relationship between the factory floor folks and the office people. Maybe there's some collaboration that we don't see or understand that's happening, which kind of requires to be in office. Moving on, James, I saw this piece of news today about Sheryl Sandberg. She's the COO of Facebook's Meta. She has resigned. She's been there for a long time, almost like the public face of the company after Mark Zuckerberg, and she's feeling burnt out apparently. So apparently the feeling of being burnt out takes no, doesn't matter who you are, how high you rise in the company, it can hit anyone.
Yeah, I don't think that there's an executive at a publicly traded company that isn't burnt out. Like I just don't think that exists. So yeah, it's, I think hopefully this is a healthy thing where it's like she's just at a point of her career. She feels like, okay, I've helped these amazing companies, and most recently at Meta, and now it's time for me to take a step down. So I get it.
Yeah, and speaking of those good logos, I mean, having that Facebook Meta logo on her resume, and her body of work is extremely well documented. I'm sure she could take some as much time as she needs and walk in pretty much anywhere she wants.
Oh, I mean, if I were her, I would just I'd basically just go on the board and advise a bunch of like startups and growth stage companies for, put in like 100K annual contract and just show up like once a month for an hour.
Exactly.
Like that's
The speaking circuit.
right. Yeah. I mean, that's really, after you get a gig like that, I mean, you really don't have to be putting in these, 60 to 100-hour work weeks anymore.
So James, we're kind of entering this new phase in our economy right now. I think it was a couple weeks ago, the first big one in terms of announcing layoffs that I saw personally was Snap. It wasn't so much a layoffs, but it was a massive deceleration in hiring. I think their hiring plan was initially 2,000, and they've brought it all the way back to 500. And that, in my world, in terms of the news that I look at, kind of kicked off a whole bunch of, we're going to stop hiring, we're going to start laying off. And I saw a couple more companies today, two software unicorns. One was Loom and the other Carbon Health, both announcing some layoffs. So what are you seeing out there in terms of companies and stopping hiring, slowing hiring, and laying folks off, unfortunately?
So what's happening is just due to the growth that we were experiencing last year, Q4, and even in Q1, it was a little bit rockier because of the Ukraine-Russia war. But prior to that, particularly, last year we were seeing a pretty incredible growth, and companies were raising money at incredible valuations that we're really not seeing on the market at this point in time. And part of when the most successful companies in the world, when things are going really well, they're 100% offense. They're going to scale as aggressively as they possibly can, and if they're well funded, and particularly if they're able to raise at 100x valuations of ARR,
Right.
they're going to go out and proactively scale teams, primarily on the go-to-market side and on the product and engineering side. Many times they're going to make those hires proactively. So these same companies that are incredibly aggressive when things are going well, they're also incredibly aggressive when the market turns. So either way, they're never going to just kind of wait and hold off and take their time. Typically, they're going to be very aggressive when things are well and very aggressive when things take a turn for the worse. And so a lot of these companies that hired, have realized, okay, now due to the Fed's strategy or decision that 7% inflation is really way too high, we need to rope that in. They're obviously seeing the growth slow, and they're maybe some of the revenue projections that they made last year are really not going to come to pass, and so now they're going to go through deep cuts. And the other thing is that these companies, like, they're not going to, it's really bad for morale to go through several layoffs, right? Like, okay, we're only going to lay off like a handful of people and then see how it goes, and then maybe we need to do another layoff. Like, they would prefer to say, okay, we're going to cut once, we're going to cut deep, and then we're going to, and then just focus on growth again, which is the reality is that it is better for morale of the team, because you don't want people just constantly in fear that that they don't have job security. So if you can do it once and do it the right way, which is, there's really no easy way to do it, but you should do it by giving severances and taking care of people and these types of things, and to the extent that you can. I think that's what these organizations are doing right now. They're just cutting deep. And the other thing that's got companies freaked out about what's going on in the market is because typically when the U.S. economy enters a recession or a downturn, we have monetary policies that the Fed can leverage for, like, lowering interest rates. But what's interesting about what we're going through right now is we're raising interest rates, because we have this inflation problem. So this is why, a lot of VCs are telling their portfolio companies, like, this may not be the V-shaped recovery that we experienced in 2020, right? Like, where it was just like very sudden, and then we came back like with a lot of power, like a quarter or two later, within tech, right? Tech rebounded faster, I think, than the greater economy. But with this, we don't have those monetary tools to really to leverage at this point, because we need to increase interest rates if the goal is to lower inflation. And I think a lot of these tech companies, quite honestly, probably were okay with the 7% inflation because they were growing faster than they ever had before. And so it's now that they're looking at like, okay, Fed policy is to bring down inflation. That's going to slow down growth. Even the Fed's come out and said like we have to slow down growth if we're going to bring inflation down to the 2% target. Like it just has to happen.
Right.
So that's kind of what's going on. I think what kind of people are saying, right, is that what's happening now could be a slower recovery, but the good news is that it's not likely to cut as deep as it did in 2020. So hopefully what we're going to see is a more mild recession. In my opinion, I think it's going to be a recession, but hopefully it's going to be a lot more mild, and then it might it's not going to necessarily be as aggressive growth coming out of it, right? Is I think what people are projecting at this point.
Right. Yeah, I would totally agree with that assessment. And well, hey, James, this has been fun. We're out of time for today, but thank you so much for breaking down the news of the week. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. This was fun.
Bye.
Bye.